Dr. Miller with a video on rest redistribution. If you have watched any of the videos I've produced, you know that one of the areas I'm interested in is sets and repetition strategies, and how we arrange reps within a set, whether and how we arrange set to set. Does that matter? Does it make any difference? In terms of the output? So I have a study here that I'm going to talk about recently, because this talks about one of these strategies to manipulate rest in a non-traditional format. And this is called rest redistribution. So if you've watched the video on the cluster sets, cluster set traditionally is like 2 reps at a time, 2 plus 2 plus 1, perhaps 5 reps. In a snatch session, it could be like 2 reps, rest 30 seconds, then hit a rep, hit that last one. So that's a set of 3, then take your normal 2 to 3 minute rest or whatever it may be. I do things like 5 plus 5 for 10 rep sets. So doing a back squat, especially somebody who's inexperienced, but even then, somebody who's experienced, that allows you to keep the load up. It keeps the bar velocity, on target if you have a target range. So if you're doing velocity-based training. So just a very helpful structure. So in this case, a 5 plus 5, you do 5 reps, rack the bar, put the bar down if you're doing deadlifts or something like that. And then rest for 30 seconds, maybe 15 if you're doing something more hypertrophy focused, and then, unrack the bar and complete the set. Rest as usual, 2 to 3 minutes. I found this very helpful in compound movements to maintain technique. And there's recently a meta-analysis that was completed. It's likely that hypertrophy is better with the straight set, and that's not a surprise because you have more metabolic type of triggers that are accruing in a longer set without any rest. So again, that makes perfect sense. But if somebody's more strength focused and maybe lifting some heavier loads, it may be a good idea to have some sort of interrest phase. And rest pause falls in the same, I think. Rest pause is usually more about going to failure or pushing a set, and it's a real focus on density training. Very effective, I feel like, for isolation exercise. Is brutal. It can be brutal, and rest pause can be brutal for more compound movements, but great for isolation exercises. So anyway, this idea of rest redistribution is along the similar lines. I mentioned like the 5 plus 5 type of training. The 5 plus 5 cluster might be done, again with that inter-set rest period. I guess I should say intra-set rest period during the actual set itself. But then you would rest normally. So in rest redistribution, though, you're saying, well, like this study, for instance, did, I believe it was 10 repetitions, if I remember right. And looking at these repetitions in a traditional way would be you do 10 and then it was 40 total reps for the whole session. So you do 10 repetitions. It was 8 repetitions, excuse me. And then you rest for, it was 10 reps. I had to double check. I'm looking at right in front of me. I don't know why I don't trust what I see sometimes. I've read the study 3 times. You think I would you'd understand a little more. But anyway, so they did basically 40 reps, 4 sets of 10, or reconfigured it to do 10 sets of 4 with shorter rest periods. And I had a student do something like this previously with biceps curls, and she got a poster out of it. It was interesting to look at it. Same load and the same situation here. And so the idea was to see what happens to, this is an acute study, meaning it wasn't done over, 8 training sessions or anything like that, but looking at what happens to mean velocity of the barbell. So when we think about the quality of the movement, is setting up 3 sets of 10 with a traditional 180-second rest, in this case 3 minutes, as compared to taking more frequent rests, but shorter ones. So the time, the total time resting is still the same between the trials. So 60-second rests periods rather than the 180. So taking more rest. All right. Now the difference is, again, you're not doing a 30-second rest mid-set and then doing your traditional rest after. So this study was by Boffey, by the way, 2021. So a recent publication at the time that I'm recording this video. And what I really liked about this study, can I like a study? I don't know. Is that the right thing to say? Is it incorporated looking at both sexes and seeing if there was a difference between the two, and then also the people in the study, the participants in the study, were strong. So you're talking about 1.64 average strength to mass ratio, which is great for squat. This was done with the back squat, and so very interesting study to say the least because of that. Again, Boffey et al. This was called Efficacy of Rest Redistribution During Squats, Considerations for Strength and Sex. And so what they did is they broke up, they looked at excuse me back for a second, they looked at the mean velocity over all the repetitions, over this sequence of movements. sequence of movements over sequence. I can't think today. So at the time I'm recording this, we had university weightlifting nationals this morning. And so I had an athlete that, congratulations to Morgan. She won the 45 kilo university national championship in weightlifting. So I think my mind's a little shot. You know, if you've ever coached before, well, maybe I think my mind's just shot. Maybe that's just more it. But anyway, mean velocity of all the repetitions was significantly different between both groups. So they did this 40 reps, whether with the traditional type of rest period or they did the 40 reps chopping it up into shorter rest periods, you know, but not having as much of a cluster of repetitions at a time. Okay. And so mean velocity, and this, you know, the quality of the movement basically was better between the two situations, between the two strategies. The quality of repetitions were better in the rest redistribution group. And that makes sense. I mean, if you are, so like in something like a snatch or clean and jerk, usually that third rep is when things go crap. The research literature seems to support, especially when we talk about heavier lifts. Research literature would support that. I mean, heavier in the sense of, you know, you're starting to get in the 80% plus range. And so, you know, not surprisingly in a study like this, when you're seeing, you know, a set that's longer, a set of 10, you know, after that, and they even broke this up, so sets 1 through 20 and 21 through 40. They broke them up into two separate categories. And like the traditional group went from 0.72 meters per second on average to 0.67. And then the rest redistribution group basically kept it the same from 0.75 to 0.73. Now, it's not, you know, you might say, well, 0.73 to 0.67, that's not a, you know, practically significant difference. Maybe, but over time, if this is the approach, a frequent approach that's taken, that, you know, it's kind of like taking a 1 millimeter difference in your stride length over the course of a marathon. That can really add up over time is the point. And it was statistically significant, which sometimes, again, doesn't mean it's important. But in this case, you know, even the Gainz D that was done, so the effect size, you're talking about effect sizes, you know, 1.14 and 0.89. Those are some massive effect sizes if you want to think of it that way. Anything over 0.2, 2.2, 0.23, 0.3 is trivial. And so now you're getting in some large effect sizes, very large effect sizes. So again, something that's meaningful. And this is in a strong group, right? A strong group. So everything else was equal in terms of total session time. You know, I'll use this word approach, significant difference, but it wasn't significant difference between the total time. So this could be so if you took the idea is you took the same training session, you're doing a squat session, and you're saying, hey, I want to keep the quality of the movement up. I want to keep the bar velocity quality as high as possible. What's a better way to do it? Is it better to take, you know, longer repetition sets, higher repetition sets, and longer rest periods, or do, you know, shorter blocks of extra repetitions, but then take shorter rest periods? Now, this supports my bias, by the way, and I have a heavy, strong, healthy bias towards cluster sets, and I'm a quality movement. You know, I deal with mostly like Olympic style weightlifters in terms of the performance side, and so, you know, the quality of movement really matters. Even when I think I mentioned before, if when I'm working with newbies or novices, I like clusters just because, you know, like the old, like ACSM guidelines and stuff, like the 3 sets of 1 to 3 sets and 8 to 12 reps. Well, if you have somebody who's just starting out, maybe you're just starting out, you try to do a set of 12, you know, back squat. Number one, can you even back squat correctly? And number two, you know, you get to rep 3, and again, the stability is going to go out the window. Even if you're using a load that you could do 20 times and you're only going to do it 12, you know, you're 7 to fail or something, even, you know, off the chart, not off the charts, but something that is leaving a lot of room, a lot of reps in reserve. You know, you're talking about losing technique and losing quality of movement. So I'm a big fan of chopping up sets. Unless hypertrophy is the goal, especially the isolation movements, no need to do this. But in exercise, compound movements, if quality leading to strength and power development is of interest, you know, we don't want to go into that fatigue zone because it starts to mess the size principle of motor unit recruitment, how we get to those larger fibers. All right. We want to stay out of that repetition. Again, if you see my video on size principle of motor unit recruitment, we talk about the 3 different types, 3 different strategies in order to get to the larger fibers, the type 2X fibers. And that's maximal, dynamic, and repetition. And, you know, we want to stay away from, like this case, the repetition method was more the 4x10. And you have more of a maximal, even a little bit more of a dynamic, perhaps, just because the load wasn't incredibly high. You know, with the rest redistribution group, doing the smaller blocks. So the quality of movement stays up. Not surprisingly then, later in the set or later in the 40 repetitions, the bar was still moving really well. Now, whether this translates, this is not a training study. So, we have to be careful in inferring any of this, of course. It's not like, well, for sure, rest redistribution works out. And this meta-analysis that was published recently, looking at cluster sets and rest redistribution, it's what you'd expect. It's more favorable to do rest redistribution than traditional sets in terms of quality of movement. But for hypertrophy goals, it may not be something to stick with, right? So you have to know when to use these tools. That's with all these repetition schemes and strategies. They're tools. You have to know when to use them. So I think rest redistribution is it's a great strategy. It's one of many good strategies. By the way, there's no differences between the sexes, between men and women, and how they responded to these two different strategies. So there's no significant difference anyway. But in terms of building strength and power, this could be a way to do it and keep that quality of movement up, which may over time produce a better outcome in terms of strength and power and rate of force development, really. All right. Hopefully you hung with that. Apologize if I was scatterbrained more than usual. It's been a busy day and a good day for sure. And I hope you found this video helpful. And if you haven't had a chance, check out some of the other videos I've put up about these different set and repetition strategies. What I think about them. And this one happens to be a journal review of the study by Boffey, which I think frames this idea well. But those other videos are more just about the concepts of how these rest periods, interwoven rest periods into sets work out, like cluster sets, for example. Okay, that's all. I'll see you in the next video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope you all have a good weekend. And if you're watching this on a Monday, then I hope you have a good weekend eventually. If you're watching this now, the day that I'm making this, it's Friday here, at least in the United States. So I hope you have a good weekend.